Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. Before we dive into this heartwarming story, hit subscribe so you'll never miss the most courageous dog tales we share every day. Imagine the silence after a war. It's not the quiet you think you want. It's a silence that screams with the ghosts of 1,000 nightmares. For a former Army Ranger named Alex Jennings, that silence was a living, breathing thing. He ran from it all the way to a secluded cabin in the heart of Oregon, where the only thing he heard was the wind whispering through the pines. But what if the silence was broken not by a memory, but by a sound so small, so desperate, that it changes your entire life? What if the battlefield you thought you'd left behind wasn't a war zone in Afghanistan, but a deserted logging trail in your own backyard? And what if the most powerful soldier you ever met, the one who would save you from yourself, wasn't a man in uniform, but a dog in a black plastic bag? This isn't just a story about a hero saving a bunch of dogs. This is a story about a hero who was saved in return. And it all began with a choice that no soldier should ever have to make. A choice between life and death. The question is, what would you have done? You hear a lot of stories about what happens to soldiers after the war. They come home to parades and accolades, but what happens after the applause fades? For Alex Jennings, a former Army Ranger, the quiet was the hardest part. Not the quiet of a peaceful night, but the silence after the explosions had stopped. The screaming had gone quiet, and the missions were over. That silence was a living thing, a predator that chased him from the battlefields of Afghanistan, all the way back to the solitude of the Oregon forests. He'd bought a small, isolated cabin where the only neighbors were towering pines, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves. He was a man built for action, for chaos. But now he found a strange comfort in the mundane, the scent of damp earth, the rhythm of chopping wood, the predictable path he walked every morning. He wasn't running from anything, not really. He was just trying to find a place where the echoes of his past couldn't reach him. And for a long time, it worked. Until that morning. The air was crisp, the sky a bruised purple, and the old logging trail was exactly as he'd left it. But as he rounded the bend near the creek, his heart caught in his chest. At first, it looked like a mistake, a pile of large black sacks carelessly dumped by some lazy camper. His first instinct, the one honed by years of combat, was to ignore it. A simple problem that didn't need his involvement. This was his first mistake. But a single faint whimper changed everything. It wasn't a sound of aggression, but of pure, desperate agony. His military training, the part of him that never truly left, kicked in. He approached slowly, cautiously. The air was still unnaturally so, but a sharp, acrid smell hung in the air, something chemical and wrong. With a pounding heart, he reached out his hand, trembling as it touched the cold plastic. The bag moved. He ripped it open, and the sight that met his eyes was a different kind of war. Inside, a magnificent black Labrador was convulsing, its mouth flecked with foam, its eyes rolling back in its head. Poison. Pure, unadulterated cruelty. Alex dropped to his knees, his mind racing. This was a horror he never expected to face. This was a battlefield he never trained for. He looked around and saw the full scope of the tragedy. There weren't just one, but 8 sacks in total, arranged like an offering to a dark god. This was the plot twist. The initial encounter, the one he almost ignored, was just the beginning of a story far darker and more profound than he could have imagined. His quiet life was over. Because as he tore open the other bags, his heart breaking with every whimper, a single thought, a promise he'd once made, roared to life inside him. Leave no one behind. That wasn't just a military code. It was the voice of Sergeant Ben Miller, his old squad leader, the one who didn't make it home. Alex stood up, his fists clenched, his eyes blazing with a newfound purpose. He wasn't leaving anyone here. Not this time. The frantic race to the nearest vet clinic 30 miles away was a silent prayer. One hand on the wheel, the other holding the limp body of the dog he would soon name Echo, a constant reminder of the pain that had brought them together. Every bump in the road was a gut punch. Every second felt like a lifetime. He was a man used to facing explosions and gunfire, But this silent, desperate drive was the most terrifying mission of his life. And it was just the beginning. How do you heal a wound you can't see? How do you save a life that's already broken? That's the question that would define the next chapter of his life. The 20-minute drive to the vet clinic was a blur of flashing lights and silent prayers. Alex gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white, one hand steadying the limp body of the dog he'd later call Echo, wrapped in his jacket. Every second felt like a decade. Every bump in the gravel road was a hammer to his ribs, a grim reminder of how fragile these lives were. He was a man who had faced explosions and firefights. But this silent, desperate race was the most terrifying mission of his life. He burst through the clinic doors like a man possessed. "Help! Please! Poison dogs! 8 of them! My truck! Hurry!" His voice, usually steady and low, was a panicked rasp. A woman in her 40s with a calm face and nerves of steel, Dr. Anya Sharma, didn't ask questions. She took one look at his wild eyes and the limp dog in his arms, and she knew. She just knew. The clinic, normally a place of quiet professionalism, became a war zone. They worked for hours, flushing stomachs, administering activated charcoal, and giving injections and oxygen. But this was a battle they couldn't win completely. The first blow came when the youngest pair, barely more than puppies, succumbed to the poison. Alex hadn't cried in a decade, not since his last tour in Afghanistan. But that day, he did. He held their tiny, lifeless bodies, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He had failed. He couldn't save them all. It was a familiar, crushing weight. Dr. Sharma found him later exhausted, but still standing vigil over the 6 survivors. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and respect. "They need round-the-clock care. It'll be a fight." She thought he'd say no, that he'd leave it to her, but he just nodded. "I'll do it." She blinked, surprised. "You're going to take care of 6 poisoned, traumatized Labradors?" He didn't hesitate. Yes. He had nothing left to give, or so he thought. But in their wounded eyes, he found a purpose he hadn't had in years. That night, his quiet cabin became a triage center. Blankets, towels, water bowls, he worked without sleep, checking on each dog every hour. He gave them names. The one he'd carried now, quiet and watchful, he named Echo for the echoes of pain that still haunted them both. The quiet one with the scarred ear became Gus. The fiercest male was Roach. Each name was a piece of his past, a tribute to the brothers he'd lost. For the first 48 hours, he barely ate. He just cared for them. He watched Gus once, too scared to eat, finally finish a bowl of food. He saw Roach the protector growl softly at anyone but Alex. And he witnessed a tiny, fragile bit of progress. But then the nightmares started. Not his own, not yet. The dogs. They whimpered and shook in the night, hiding under the furniture. One night, Echo, startled by a sound, bit his hand by accident, thinking she was being attacked. Alex didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He just sat on the floor and waited until she crawled into his lap, whimpering. He whispered, "It's okay. I get it. I see you." Because he did. He knew the fear, the helplessness, the flashbacks. He had lived through them too. The cabin that once echoed with silence now echoed with the sounds of life paws, scratching soft whines, and one sound he hadn't heard in years, his own quiet laughter. He was saving them, but what he didn't realize was that they were saving him too. He'd come home from a war he couldn't win, only to find himself in a quiet war he was finally ready to fight. And it was just the beginning. Life in the cabin settled into a new, beautiful routine. The silence that once haunted Alex was now filled with the gentle pitter-patter of paws, the soft jingle of collars, and the occasional joyous bark. The dogs' once timid shadows were now full of personality. Gus, the one with the scarred ear, would nudge Alex's hand for affection. Ace, the boldest, would patrol the perimeter like a good soldier. And Echo, she was the heart of the pack. She no longer flinched at sudden movements. She would sit by Alex's side for hours, a quiet, solid presence. This was a fragile piece, and Alex had just enough time to believe it would last forever. But a ghost from the past was about to appear. A twist that would shatter their fragile world. One day, While Alex was teaching the dog some basic commands, his old military buddy, Sergeant Ben Miller, showed up. Ben was not just a friend. He was the last remaining link to Alex's old life. The two hadn't spoken since they came home, both too broken to reach out to the other. Ben saw Alex's post on social media and, feeling a strange pull, drove all the way from Texas. But he didn't come to help. He came to warn Alex. "What are you doing, man?" Ben asked, his voice low and full of concern. "You're an Army Ranger. You're built for missions, not for this." He gestured at the dogs. "This is a weakness. It's just going to hurt you more." This was a gut-punching moment for Alex. The one person who was supposed to understand him was telling him to give up. The two men stood on opposite sides of a mental battlefield, their old friendship hanging by a thread. But then, Echo, sensing the tension, slowly walked over to Ben and gently nudged his hand. Ben flinched, but then he looked at Echo's kind eyes and something in him softened. He saw not a weak, abused animal, but a survivor. And just as Alex's hope was renewed, the real setback hit. During the night, Echo suddenly collapsed, her small body convulsing violently. The liver failure she'd been fighting had finally won. Alex, with Ben's help, rushed her to Dr. Sharma. But this time, the doctor's face was grim. "I don't know, Alex. We've done everything we can." Alex looked at Echo, lying on the sterile table, a frail, dying echo of her former self. He looked at Ben, and a cold anger washed over him. The abuser was still out there walking free, while Echo was fighting for her life. This was not a war he could sit out. This was a war he had to win. While Echo fought for her life, Alex turned from healer back into a soldier. He used his old training, his instincts for tracking and intelligence gathering to find the people responsible. He wasn't looking for revenge, but for a different kind of justice. He was going to make sure that the people who caused so much pain could never do this to anyone again. He was going on a mission for his dogs, a mission for the man he used to be, and a mission for the man he was just beginning to become. The next chapter of this story would not be a fight for survival, but a fight for justice. And the battle was just beginning. The old rusted computer monitor in Alex's cabin was a far cry from the high-tech equipment he used in the army, but his mission was the same: find the enemy. He spent days and nights digging through online forums, local classifieds, and even social media pages for dog shows. He wasn't looking for a confession. He was looking for a pattern. And what he found was more disturbing than he could have ever imagined. The people who ran the illegal puppy mill weren't some faceless criminals. They were a seemingly respectable couple from a nearby town known for winning ribbons at local dog shows. They presented themselves as passionate breeders, but their business was built on a foundation of cruelty and lies. Alex's instincts kicked in. This was a reconnaissance mission. He gathered photos, timestamps, and witness accounts from online forums where people complained about sick puppies they'd bought from the couple. He built a case, piece by piece, a silent, methodical war against evil. The day he handed over the evidence to the local sheriff, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't had since his last tour. The sheriff, a man who initially saw Alex as just a loner with a bunch of rescue dogs, was shocked. The evidence was irrefutable. A surprise raid was carried out on the couple's property, and what they found was a nightmare of abuse and neglect. The couple was arrested, and the news sent shockwaves through the community. Justice had finally been served, and Alex had just won his first battle. But the biggest victory was yet to come. He was sitting with a still weakened Echo on the porch when a call came in. It was from a non-profit foundation that had been following his story online. They wanted to do something bigger. They proposed an idea so incredible it took Alex's breath away. They wanted to buy his property and turn it into an official sanctuary for abused dogs and veterans with PTSD. The idea was simple but profound. A place where two different kinds of broken souls could heal each other. Alex agreed, but on one condition. The sanctuary wouldn't be named after him. It would be named the House of Echoes, in honor of the one dog who brought him back from the silent battlefield inside his head. When the sanctuary officially opened, the place was a vibrant scene of life and hope. The 6 Labradors, now healthy and happy, ran free in the vast fields. And then the first group of veterans arrived. They were just like Alex, haunted by memories, withdrawn and hesitant. But when a veteran in a wheelchair, a man who hadn't smiled in years, looked up and saw Echo, now a confident and gentle dog, come over and lay her head on his lap, that was the moment Alex knew he had done something right. He hadn't just saved a few dogs. He had created a place where the echoes of war and abuse could be replaced by the echoes of laughter, hope, and a second chance. He came home to escape a war, only to find himself fighting a new one. A war for compassion, for healing, and for the simple truth that sometimes the greatest soldiers are the ones who need to be rescued. Months turned into years. The small, secluded cabin in Oregon was no longer a place of quiet retreat for one man. It had become the House of Echoes, a symbol of hope for many. Word of the sanctuary spread across the country, inspiring documentaries, news features, and even a book. Alex, once a reclusive soldier haunted by his past, had become an unlikely hero. His story a powerful testament to the fact that some wounds can only be healed by helping others. Echo, once a terrified broken dog, was now the queen of the sanctuary, a gentle soul who would greet every new veteran and every new rescue dog. She seemed to know their pain, and she would simply lie by their side, a quiet, living reminder that everything would be okay. The other 5 dogs, Gus, Roach, Spade, Whiskey, and Ace, were not just pets. They were co-founders, each with their own story, each with their own special role in the healing process. But the most powerful symbol of all was Alex himself. One evening, he was sitting on the porch watching his pack of dogs run free across the fields, their happy barks echoing in the forest. He looked at Echo, who had curled up at his feet, and a profound sense of peace washed over him. He had faced down ghosts, battled injustice, and built a sanctuary from the ground up. He realized that the greatest victory wasn't the medal he'd earned in the army or the court sentence for the abusers. The greatest victory was finding a life worth living. He came home a broken soldier, but he was saved not by therapy or a medal, but by a pack of dogs who had seen a darkness he knew all too well. They had shown him that love is a language that needs no words, and that the greatest healing happens when you least expect it. In saving them, he had finally found his forever home. If this story of love, redemption, and second chances touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel. We share incredible stories of courage and compassion every day, reminding us all that we can find light in the darkest of places. And we want to hear from you. What do you think is the most powerful takeaway from Alex and Echo's journey? Let us know in the comments below. Your stories and thoughts inspire us to keep sharing these incredible tales.